terms of clinical evidence, there's some really significant new requirements that aren't required at the moment, including the SSCP and the PSUR. If you haven't heard them already, these are going to stick in your brain: the summary of safety performance and the product summary update report. There you go. Periodic safety update report. So I'm not going to talk in detail on this slide, but the main points are that this summary of safety and performance is going to be written by the manufacturer, it's going to be reviewed by the notified body, and it will be available to the public via UDMED. So your users and your patients are going to be able to read this information. So it's really important that it's written clearly and understandably and is true to the information about your device. The periodic safety update report, again, it's written by the manufacturer, it's reviewed by the notified body, and it is held on UDMED, so it will be available to the competent authorities. It won't be publicly available, so it won't be available to all of the public via UDMED. But it's important to know that all of the competent authorities will see it. And then you have to consider frequency. So it depends on the risk of the device. If it's a class 3 device, you're going to have to update this information yearly. If it's an implantable device, then it's yearly. If it's a 2A device, at least every 2 years. So this is a lot of additional extra work. I think manufacturers were doing reviews of their post-market information often on an annual basis, but that wasn't then being reviewed by the notified body and it wasn't then being shared with the commission. So I think this is a significant change in terms of what manufacturers have to do. And also about what we have to do. That's a lot more work that is not currently something that we do as an activity. It's important to note that it starts to add new concepts in terms of the population that use the device. So it has to be information about the population that use the device or expected. Is there an age limit? Is it for a particular gender? Are there any comorbidities? And also about use frequency. So is it used more than once, or is it halted as soon as the disease progressed, or is there further re-intervention? So all of those things are going to have to be discussed in your PSUR. And then there's those devices that are class 3 or class 2B active devices intended to administer or remove medicines. So for these devices, you have to have your clinical evidence. You then have to have your PSUR that goes to UDMED and goes to the competent authorities. You then have to have your SSCP that goes to the notified body and then UDMED and is available for everyone out there. Oh, and then you also have a clinical evidence assessment report. I think that's what it stands for, assessment report, that the notified body will prepare, and we will then send that to the commission for their assessment and review. So that information will be passed on, and there will be an expert panel that then reviews that assessment report and makes a decision. So historically, as a notified body, we would have assessed the information, we would have issued a certificate. This is an extra consultation procedure where it's going to delay the issue of your notified body certificate. And this expert panel might come back with questions that have to be addressed before we can issue certificates. So in terms of the clinical evaluation consultation procedure, what does that mean? It applies to those devices, but it does not apply at certificate renewal. It doesn't apply where there are modifications. So there may be situations where the manufacturer won't need an update. And so if there's a common specification for a device, then there may not be a need for the CER to go out to the Clinical Evaluation Assessment Committee. So notified bodies must notify the competent authority about whether we've made a decision and whether the consultation is to be applied. There's a few aspects that the device will come into review by the notified body. There will be a report issued by the notified body out to the commission. They will then get 21 days, I think, to review the information and make a decision. In many cases, if it's not novel, we expect them to respond and say that they don't want to do anything further. But in some cases where there's novel devices, we expect them to do further review and maybe come back with questions. And then we can issue certificates once we've closed out all questions. In your QMS audits, you have 13485 audits, you have MDD audits, you have ISO 9001 audits. And going forwards, there will be requirements for post-market assessments and under the MDR. So we've already talked about that. QMS audits, when we're looking at the MDR, we're going to be asking you what's your procedure for the MDR, show me the process, what's defined and documented, and do you have evidence? So I think there's a few things that manufacturers can do as they approach the MDR date of application. They need to review their current quality management system and review their procedures, and they also need to review their current product portfolio to understand if there's any products that are going to be immediately affected or that need to be reclassified for the MDR. Are there any products that will have certification under the MDR that don't currently have certification? Because if there are, then they will need that certification by May 2020. So it's really important to get that information and understand their systems in order to be prepared for May 2020.